Today from the Global Lane, Britain's Brexit mess. Voters betrayed, Parliament shut down. Imprisoned in China for standing against forced abortion. This blind attorney shares his vision for U.S.-China policy. Is Trump on the right course? Hurricane Dorian devastates the Bahamas. Was climate change to blame? And what the U.S. and Germany need to do about human rights and Hong Kong. And it's all right here on the Global Lane. Is a political and economic train wreck ahead for Great Britain? Nobody seems to know what to do about Brexit, members of Parliament or the country as a whole. The people voted to leave the European Union, but it's easier said than done. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson lost a big battle recently when Parliament passed a bill to block a no-deal Brexit. Dale Hurd brings us more.
The bill blocking a no-deal Brexit must now pass the House of Lords, where some have said it could run into trouble.
There are a lot of peers, Lords, who are in favour of Brexit and who do not like this bill, and they will try to filibuster.
Pro-Brexit Lords were also said to have prepared 100 amendments to slow down the process. But if the Lords pass it, as many believe, Johnson says that would effectively end his Brexit negotiations with the European Union. What some fear is coming has been described as a train wreck. But scary stories also make useful propaganda. No one really knows what will happen.
I have never known a time when British politics has been like this. I've been working in Westminster for nearly 20 years.
We're in highly uncharted waters. Nobody knows what's going to happen next.
Those who oppose a no-deal Brexit have been warning it could cause food and drug shortages, travel delays, even new fighting in Northern Ireland. But the Bank of England now reports that the economic shock of a no-deal Brexit would be less severe because of preparations that have been made since last year. But the economy would shrink by only 5.5% instead of the 8% that had been predicted.
Now Boris Johnson has shut down Parliament. Dale Hurd says it's likely to remain closed until October. Dale's in the CBN newsroom. Dale, so why did Prime Minister Johnson shut down the Parliament?
Because it was in his way. He would never admit that. Look, I'm going to share something that may not seem related, but it really is. Boris Johnson was once a journalist, okay, and he was fired for making up quotes. Now, was this wrong? Yes, but it shows something about his personality, that he's results-driven. He didn't have the quotes he needed, and so he made some up. He would like to see Brexit go through. Parliament's in his way. He tried to get them out of the way. It backfired. He suffered a number of defeats. Now we're waiting to see what happens next.
The British people voted more than 3 years ago to leave the EU. So what's the big hang-up?
Yeah, it's kind of like a student that waited until the last week of the semester to do a term paper. I mean, they've kicked this can down the road. They haven't been able to agree. I think the British government is incapable of an agreement. And Boris is simply trying to respect the referendum vote, which was to leave. And the feeling is, look, we're never going to get a deal or agree. Let's just leave. But I'm not sure that's going to happen now.
Now, some have pushed for another referendum. Is that a dead thing, or is it still alive?
I don't know about another referendum, but it will be very interesting if there is a snap election or when there is another general election. Because right now you've got Parliament calling the show, and I really think that resentment is building out there against Parliament for sort of hijacking what should have been a process of leaving the European Union.
Now, Theresa May was forced out as Prime Minister because of Brexit, so what's the likelihood that Boris Johnson will suffer a similar fate? I mean, this is a big political gamble he's taking.
Yeah, and I think so far, I have to say, I think he's lost in that gamble. And from what I can see, I think he will resign in a couple of weeks after these party conferences. Why? If he's forced legally to seek a Brexit extension, he said he'd rather be dead in a ditch. So I think he'd rather resign with his honor than do that.
And he may be dead politically then. So President Trump has said the United States will jump in, of course, to help Britain with trade once it leaves the EU. So what difference has that made in calming Brexit fears in the UK?
Well, it helps, but what people call Project Fear, this nonstop fear-mongering in the media and from the elites, that, I mean, everything from a gonorrhea outbreak. I mean, the claims are ridiculous, the stuff that's going to happen. You know, you think cats and dogs are going to fall from the sky. I mean, I think it's backfired. I think people are like, oh, come on, this is silly. It's going to be chaotic no matter what happens. It is good that the U.S. is offering trade terms, but with or without a deal, it's not going to be neat and tidy.
So, Dale, what should we look for in the days ahead? And, you know, I hear from a lot of people here, why should we even care in the United States about all this?
I think there's going to be chaos, and I think that's related to what should interest Americans. This is what happens when you don't have a constitution. People may not realize the British don't have a constitution. They operate off the acts of Parliament and judicial precedent. And that's why there's all this squabbling over which branch of government has the legal right to do what. We're going to watch this and learn, because if you believe in a deep state, and there's a deep state in Britain, it doesn't want to leave the European Union. And if they successfully stop Brexit, I think we'll see civil unrest.
And we thought things were crazy here in the U.S. I mean, you've been covering Great Britain for many years now. Have you ever seen it like this?
No, and they have a longer wick than we do before they explode. I mean, Americans, I think, go into the streets sooner. But you can just feel the rage building out in the heartland, where people have suffered because of uncontrolled immigration. People want their national sovereignty back. They don't want EU stamped on their passport anymore. And it's going to be interesting to watch, to see what happens if the elites in London keep Brexit from happening.
Okay, we appreciate you keeping an eye on this for us. CBN News Senior International Correspondent Dale Hurd, thanks for sharing those insights.
Happy to.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
A growing number of economists say American consumers may soon feel the sting of higher tariffs on Chinese products entering the United States. President Trump says the tariffs are necessary. China is being hurt by them much more than the United States. He suggests the short-term pain may be worth the long-term gain. Chinese negotiators are now set to resume trade talks with their counterparts in Washington next month. Is a deal likely? Well, joining us is Chen Guangzhen. He's an attorney and human rights activist who spent 4 years in Chinese prisons for opposing China's forced abortion policy. He's a member of the faculty at Catholic University of America. Mr. Chen recently wrote a column in the Washington Post saying that President Trump has the right strategy on China. So, Mr. Chen, thank you for being with us. Why do you think President Trump is on the right course with China?
I think when we're balancing the U.S.-China relationship, we have to look at the effectiveness of the strategy. And also we have to look at whether or not the Chinese Communist Party is paying attention and is noticing what the U.S. is doing. And I think what Trump is doing is very effective.
Well, what does he need to do that he's not doing?
I've had many years of dealing with the Communist Party, and so I know their weaknesses and the areas where they're soft. And Trump is demanding now that they follow the rules, and he's starting from trade and forcing the CCP to have to change and follow the rules. And this will eventually bleed into the area of human rights.
Trump has called President Xi a good man and his friend, but he also suggests he's an enemy of the United States. How would you describe President Xi Jinping? Is he a friend or foe?
I think what Trump means is that if you follow the rules, if you follow trade rules and rules that international organizations abide by, then you will be a good person. But if you continue, as the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has done, violating rules of international engagement and violating human rights, then you will be a bad person, an enemy.
You had mentioned human rights. You spent 4 years in prison, later house arrest, for fighting the rights of Chinese women and Christians. So should there be linkage in trade talks coming next month, or should trade be addressed separately from human rights?
Of course, I think that human rights should be a part of those trade talks. However, from my point of view, trade is not just about trade. How it's being talked about now, it's about equal treatment between the two countries and equal treatment across a lot of areas. At the moment, Chinese companies can operate in the U.S. without much restriction, but American companies like Google and YouTube are not able to operate in China with the same kind of, in the same way that Chinese companies can operate there. So the idea is that if there is reciprocity in terms of how companies and how trade is operating in the two countries, then with especially these kinds of companies, it will lead to further opening up of free speech and eventually further political reforms. So Trump doesn't necessarily speak about human rights, but I think in the end, what he's doing will lead to further improvements.
And the Chinese government, very tough negotiators in the trade agreement, as is President Trump. So how likely is an agreement to be reached in October or beyond?
The most important thing is not the eventual agreement itself, but it's really about the process. And is the process going to result in positive transformation? If it does come out as a favorable agreement, that's a good thing. But what the Chinese Communist Party is really worried about is losing control during that process. And if in the end it results in more equal, more reciprocal treatment on both sides, then that's a good thing. So the U.S. has already added tariffs, and the Chinese Communist Party will have to face those tariffs all the way until the point that they come to an agreement which ends the tariffs. So if we're looking at whether or not the tariffs are a good thing and the agreement is a good thing, we really have to look at what the practical outcome of it is. If an agreement is reached, but it's sort of a hollow agreement and doesn't move us forward in terms of equal treatment, then it's really been of no use at all.
Okay, Chen Guangcheng, thank you for joining us today from Catholic University in Washington, D.C.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crabb Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
It'll be a long, long road back for the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian devastated many of the country's islands. Before the Category 5 hurricane hit the Bahamas and skirted the U.S. coast, environmental extremists were sounding the alarm about global warming. Warning about Dorian, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, quote, "This is what climate change looks like." And not to be outdone, Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders said Dorian had, quote, "everything to do with climate change." Well, what they and other climate change alarmists won't tell you is that 4 of the 5 deadliest hurricanes to strike the United States actually occurred during the first half of the last century, between 1900 and 1957. It seems hurricanes were much worse 60 to 120 years ago. Well, joining us with more insights is geologist author Gregory Wrightstone. Mr. Wrightstone is author of the book Inconvenient Facts: The Science That Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know. Mr. Wrightstone, it's good to have you here with us again. So here we go again. Another major hurricane, not for the United States, but the Bahamas. Now the alarmists are coming out of the woodwork again. What do you think of that and what Bernie Sanders and AOC are saying?
Yeah, well, it's all very predictable. They use any tragedy that's weather or climate related to link it to man-made catastrophic warming. But the science, the facts, and the data actually tell us something completely different. The latest thing with this hurricane, there were 3 things that were being told by people like Al Gore and AOC related to hurricanes, that they're increasing in number, they're increasing in intensity or wind speed. And the latest thing with Dorian now is that climate change, man-made climate change, has caused hurricanes to slow down. So they're more devastating when they do hit. All of those things can be completely dispelled with the actual science on it. Even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has stated there's no causal link between rising sea surface temperatures and the number of hurricanes. They allege that the intensity may increase. And there is some data that might support that. We probably as much that go against it. But even the NOAA's top climate scientist, his name is Christopher Landsea, he predicts that warming will cause a 1% to 2% increase in hurricane wind speed. I'm not sure I agree with that, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that's the correct thing. I don't think anybody that was living on the Grand Bahamas last week and when the hurricane struck could tell the difference between 142 and 144 miles per hour. And also, when it comes to whether the hurricanes are slowing, granted, Dorian, according to the records that I was able to look at, actually I checked back on it this morning, showed that Hurricane Dorian was one of the slowest moving hurricanes that NOAA cataloged. But the bulk of these slow-moving hurricanes occurred early in the 20th century. It's not been these recent ones. So we just look. I like to use science, facts, and data. What the alarmists do is use predictions, speculation about what might happen 30, 50, or 80 years in the future based on failed climate models. I live in the real world, and I look at what's actually happening. And if these things are going to happen, we should see some evidence of that today, and we just don't.
Greg, I know years ago it was global cooling, and then the environmentalists got into this global warming kick. Now it may be back to cooling, so they just say climate change. So what are the facts? Is Earth getting warmer or cooler?
Well, we've been in a 300-plus year warming trend. It's been warming in fits and starts. We go through, you referenced the cooling period that started in the early 40s and ended in the late 70s. When I was in college, my professors, we were all discussing the possibility of going into the next ice age, which we will at some point. So we're in this warming period. I think for your viewers, the thing that's really important that's rarely talked about is we're being told, again by Al Gore and his like, that we need to be aware of increased temperatures. My God, oh my God, oh my God, it can't get higher than another 1.5 degrees centigrade or we're all going to die and it's going to be famine. Historically, what we've seen is just the opposite. Historically, these warming periods that we saw before, during the medieval times, during the time of Christ, the Roman warm period, was a time of bountiful harvests. We see there's a strong correlation between the rise and fall of temperatures and the rise and fall of civilizations. We see that great civilizations rose up during times of warming that were a lot warmer than we are today. It's the cold periods, Gary, that your viewers are probably unaware. These are the horrific times that led to crop failures, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation consistently. And it's just opposite of what we're being told. We're being told it's going to get warmer and we're all going to die. And that's just historically has not been the case at all.
Okay, I guess we'll have to leave it there. Greg Wrightstone, geologist and author, we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Gary.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
With all the important domestic news, here's an international development you may have missed. Joshua Wong, the pro-democracy activist from Hong Kong, recently visited Berlin. His trip came just several days after German Chancellor Angela Merkel returned from China. Although Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced a full withdrawal of Hong Kong's proposed extradition law, a top demand of the protesters, Wang says their protests will continue. They still want universal suffrage. Student leaders and others who are not handpicked by Beijing are denied the right to run for chief executive. Some have been denied the right to become members of the Hong Kong legislature. Student demonstrators also want an independent investigation into police brutality against them. Listen to Joshua Wong from his recent news conference in Berlin.
Political censorship and restriction of freedom of speech have just turned the entire young generation into dissidents. If we stop protesting now, no one will be able to hold President Xi, Carrie Lam, and the government responsible for their wrongdoings, human rights violation, and police brutality.
And now listen to German Chancellor Angela Merkel speaking before the German Parliament about her China visit.
Ich habe bei meinem Besuch auch wieder darauf hingewiesen, dass die Einhaltung der Menschenrechte für uns unabdingbar ist. Das gilt insgesamt. Und das gilt auch im Blick auf die Situation in Hongkong, wo wir das Prinzip ein Land, zwei Systeme weiter für richtig halten.
Madam Chancellor, it's not just raising the issue with the Chinese government leaders. Concrete steps must be taken to force the Chinese Communist Party's hand. That's why you, President Trump, and leaders of other democracies should sign on to the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Acts. Also, as Joshua Wong has requested, Hong Kong police should not receive riot control equipment from German or U.S. companies. If it continues, then both countries actually become accomplices in violating the human rights of peaceful protesters. If we in the West truly believe in human rights, which are actually God-given rights, not human ones, then we must take a stand, become advocates. You see, many of us believe God has given all humans the rights we need to advance human dignity, to succeed in life, to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What God has ordained, no man or government can alter or take away. They may attempt to suppress and oppress, but the rights given to us by God are for eternity. Our freedom and prosperity are in Him, not government. In reality, the atheist communist leaders in Beijing oppose God and His promises. The state and money are their gods. That's why Beijing is walking a thin line with Hong Kong. If President Xi sends troops into Hong Kong and pursues a crackdown, China's leaders in government and business will lose billions of dollars. If they do nothing, the Communist Party risks losing control if the pro-democracy movement spreads to the mainland. Chancellor Merkel, President Trump, keep the pressure on. Money talks. China must know if it continues to violate the one country, two systems agreement it signed 36 years ago, a heavy price will be paid in trade and global relations. If China truly wants to be a leader in the global community, then it must live up to its multilateral responsibility to honor human rights, not only for Hong Kongers, but for China's Uyghurs, Christians, and others. Well, that's it from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, iTunes, SoundCloud, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.